Thomas had traveled the world with his camera, capturing lions in the wild, eagles in flight, and sunsets that stole your breath away. But nothing could prepare him for what he found in those forgotten woods. It started with a stray dog, limping, silent, and with eyes that carried a story far too heavy for words. He didn't bark. He didn't beg. He simply stared and walked away. And for reasons Thomas couldn't explain, he followed. What he discovered deep in the forest will stay with him forever. Thomas had always believed that a camera could tell stories that words never could. For years, he wandered from mountain peaks to desert plains, searching for that one perfect shot, the kind that made people feel something. But recently, something had shifted inside him. His photos were still beautiful, but empty. They lacked meaning, like pages torn from a story he no longer understood. That's why he came to this forest, not for fame, not for work, but for silence. 3 days passed without a single photograph, just wind, leaves, and the weight of his own thoughts. And then he saw him, a dog, skinny, dirty, limping, just standing there between the trees, still as a shadow. Thomas raised his camera by instinct, but didn't click. Because the dog wasn't wild, he wasn't scared, he was just watching. And for a moment, Thomas felt it, a strange connection, not like a man seeing an animal, but like two lost souls recognizing each other. He whispered a soft, "Hello." The dog didn't respond, just turned and walked away into the woods. But somehow, that silent stare had said more than any cry for help ever could. So Thomas picked up his camera and followed. The next morning, Thomas returned to the same spot, unsure if the dog had ever been real or just a forest ghost his heart had imagined. But there he was again, waiting, not wagging his tail, not barking, just standing, watching. And when Thomas stepped forward, the dog turned once more and walked into the trees. It became a pattern. Every morning the dog appeared, and every morning he led Thomas deeper into the woods, always a few steps ahead, always silent. He never came close. He never let Thomas touch him. But his eyes, they spoke of something buried far beyond the trees, a place, a memory, maybe even a secret. Thomas began to wonder, was this just a stray dog looking for company? Or was he guiding him towards something that couldn't be said out loud? There was no collar, no name, just that limp and that look. It wasn't desperation, it was purpose. And for reasons Thomas couldn't explain, he kept following. Because deep down, he knew this wasn't just about the dog. It was about something that needed to be found by both of them. Days passed. Thomas no longer questioned the dog's presence. He had stopped searching for birds or landscapes. His lens was focused only on the silent guide who appeared each morning and disappeared into the forest each night. But on the 7th day, something changed. The dog didn't stop at the usual clearing. This time he turned sharply into a part of the woods Thomas had never explored. The trees grew denser. The light barely touched the ground. The air felt heavier, not dangerous, but old, like it remembered things people had forgotten. For hours they walked. No words, no sounds, just the crunch of leaves beneath their feet and the pull of something unseen. Then, without warning, the dog stopped. In front of them was a clearing. Hidden behind a curtain of vines and thorns stood an old wooden cabin, crooked, weathered, and nearly swallowed by the forest itself. Thomas stood frozen. It didn't look abandoned, it looked forgotten. He stepped closer, brushing away the vines. The door creaked open with the weight of time. Inside, dust-covered furniture, faded photographs on the wall, a cracked teacup still sitting on the table, as if someone had once lived there, loved there, and then simply vanished. Thomas's eyes scanned the room. On a shelf, he noticed something strange, a photo frame, slightly tilted. He lifted it. His hands trembled. It was a picture of a boy, holding the very same dog, younger, healthier, but those eyes, they were the same. The dog sat silently behind him now, watching, as if waiting for Thomas to understand. And in that moment, he did. This wasn't just a journey through trees and trails. This was a journey through grief, through memory. And the dog, he hadn't been lost. He had been leading Thomas not to a place, but to a story that the world had forgotten. Thomas stood in the center of the cabin, heart pounding, the photograph still in his hands. Who was this boy? What happened here? And why had the dog brought him back? He began to explore carefully. Each drawer, each shelf, each corner of the forgotten space, holding fragments of a life once lived. There were children's books tucked under a dusty bed, a hand-drawn family portrait pinned to the wall, a rusted collar hanging by the door, with a name tag that read, Buddy. He turned to the dog. Is that you? He whispered. The dog didn't move and just looked at him, eyes steady, patient. In a box beneath the floorboards, Thomas found a bundle of letters, old, faded, written in a child's handwriting. They spoke of happy days spent in the forest, of a boy who had no friends in the city, but had everything he needed here, a loving family and a dog who never left his side. But the letters stopped suddenly. No goodbye, no final note, only silence. That silence hung heavy now, echoing through the wooden walls like a memory trying not to fade. Thomas sat down beside the dog, not as a photographer, not as a stranger, but as someone who felt the weight of an untold story. He finally understood. The dog hadn't led him here to be found. He had led him here so someone would remember. Remember the boy. Remember the love. Remember the life that once filled this cabin with laughter. And Thomas, he knew what he had to do. Thomas stayed in that cabin longer than he planned. Days turned into weeks. He cleaned it, repaired the broken windows, framed the old photographs, and every evening, he sat on the porch with the dog, Buddy, watching the sun set through the trees. But he wasn't there to take pictures anymore. He was there to listen. He documented everything, not with filters or fancy edits, but with truth. The story of a forgotten boy, a loyal dog who never gave up, and a home that waited silently to be remembered. When Thomas finally returned to the world, he brought with him more than just images. He brought a story that touched hearts. He published it under one simple title, The Dog Who Remembered. The photos went viral. But more than the fame, it was the messages that mattered. People from around the world shared their own stories of love, of loss, of loyalty, and of the animals who saved them. Thomas had set out to find beauty, but what he found was purpose. He adopted Buddy. He kept the cabin as a place for rescue animals and people who needed healing, a quiet corner of the world where broken things were welcomed and remembered. And maybe that's what this journey was really about. Not just a dog, not just a cabin, but a reminder that some bonds can outlive time, that love never truly gets lost. It just waits to be found again. So now, it's your turn. What did you feel while hearing this story? What did it remind you of? Tell us in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if this story touched your heart, leave a like, hit subscribe, and help us share more true stories like this. Stories that prove one thing: kindness is never forgotten.